They are now. You got it? Everyone's getting them on. Test 1, 2. Go ahead, Bob. Give me a test.
Check, check. 1, 2, 3. Check, check. 1, 2, 3. Bob Luby.
Dwayne.
Dwayne Bachman. Check 1, 2, 3. Dwayne Bachman.
Good.
Check 1, 2, 3.
AJ Ganger. Check 1, 2, 3. Good.
Well, I guess that we're okay.
All right. You have the standby on it? It's not? Oh, it is. That's fine. Let me share the link.
I think so, yeah. I can't remember playing him other than last year. Unless it was in the playoffs sometime.
What kind of facility do they have? I don't recall.
Never been there.
Hang on.
That was a question I was going to ask. Did he play his senior year? Obviously he did. And I don't know if he can play.
It's on the page.
Conference before we start into our crossovers. As a coach, what do you
between the Troy Trojans and the Piqua Indians, and we are hopefully going to get to Troy to do that game. Guys, let's remind everybody where you'll be able to find the rebroadcast of the game tonight. At 4:30 p.m., we start with the Coach's Show on Monday night, followed by
game coming up, and I think basically this is a team that's very Franklin's very similar to Trotwood. They can be a big play team. They have an outstanding quarterback, a great running back, a guy that can catch the football. So they'll be ready to cause Piqua some problems along the way.
I agree with you guys 100%. We want to thank our two sponsors that we have tonight for the pregame show. Unity National Bank is your hometown banking solution. And also another sponsor for tonight's show is Gonzo Radio, commercial-free radio, where the radio listens to you. Find them on GonzoRadioPiqua.com. Gonzo Radio, bringing true classic hits back to the Piqua, the Upper Miami Valley, and the world. So, guys, what do you think? We've got a couple people sponsoring us. Gonzo Radio doing a great thing for us as well for the Indian Nation Station, putting our own page on the Gonzo Radio website. He'll be promoting a lot of stuff that we're doing for the Indian Nation Station.
Well, AJ, after seeing the replay of the Trotwood-Madison game, the game itself, it was excellent. I mean to tell you, if you pruned in to that game on Monday night and you wanted to see the game, you didn't miss a thing. The camera work was exceptional. The director, of course, was awesome, but it was everything that I thought it was going to be. And again, I've heard some people say that they looked forward to it. They had a chance to view it, and they like what they saw. And I think tonight we're going to make a few adjustments, and it'll be much, much better.
And people, I guess, were having viewing parties. Bob, you had a big party at your house watching the game over, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I invited all my friends. Both of them showed up.
Me, myself, I, and the dog, right?
Yeah.
Well, guys, from scores from last week around the GWalk, we had a lot of games. Let's try to go through these, and we'll get everyone's thoughts when we're done with them. Wayne bouncing back, winning 17-0 over Old Tangi Liberty. Sydney beats Bellefontaine 42-33 to go to 2-0. Wilmington stomped all over Greenville 60-27. West Carrollton beat Northridge 41-6. Bellbrook in a close game, close game, 12-6 winners over Fairborn. Urbana with a close game win over Stebbins 27-24. Tipp City beat Shawnee 38-0. Butler bounced back and shut out Tecumseh 42-0. Miamisburg beat CJ 48-25. Beaver Creek stomped Carroll 44-14. Lebanon beat Loveland in a close game 21-14. Springfield 27, Princeton 24. Centerville 42, Lakota West 21. Fairmont 22, Hamilton 6. Northmont 28, Fairfield 21. Springboro 37, Middletown 0. The Thursday night game was Troy beating Xenia 28-6. Guys, do any of these games jump out at you as closer than what you thought, or maybe some surprising results?
Well, the first game that I have mentioned here is the Sidney Bell Fountain game. I still think Sidney's going to be one of the 3 or 4 top opponents for the Indians before this is over. The fact that they scored 42 tells me they've got a lot of offense. The fact that Bell Fountain scored 33 might mean their defense is a little suspect.
I wonder about Vandalia Butler. They bounced back from a pretty difficult first game. They played Massillon Perry, who, by the way, played in the state finals last year.
That's true.
So I don't think that was a good indicator of how good or bad a team Butler is or was, but they came back big time against Tecumseh, put 42 points on the board, and I think Vandalia might be a team just to keep your eyes on down the road.
I think you're right, Bob.
Yeah, I think Vandalia Butler for sure. They're always that dark horse team, and they have a really good running game. They always seem to have a big back, too, that kind of helps them out along the way as well.
Well, and let's not forget Troy. Even though they got shillelagh'd in the opener against Trotwood Madison, they came back to beat Xenia. They scored 28 points. I would imagine by the time game number 10 rolls around, that could be a little different type of Troy team. I wouldn't take them for granted, that's for sure. I like to think that we ought to be careful about Tip City as well. 2-0, haven't played anybody real good. Keep your eye on the Red Devils.
Not an opponent of Piqua, but just a GWOC team, Fairmont. I'm happy to see them start the season 2-0. They defeated Hamilton 22-6, coming off a big win over Alter the previous week. Dave Miller down at Fairmont Kettering has really turned that program around. Dave was an outstanding coach at Covington prior to going to Fairmont, and just a good person. And Fairmont is due, really, to have a good season. It's been a while because they're in the tough part of the conference. Their schedule, when you're playing Centervilles and the Waynes and the big schools, Springboroughs, that's a pretty difficult schedule. But it appears that Fairmont has a very representative team and will be in most games this year.
GWOC South, Bob, can be an awfully tough place to play, especially if you have to go at them 8 or 9 times.
One game that jumps out at me, and just because I saw the game last year, was Beaver Creek Carroll. It seems like Beaver Creek this season is a much better team. Carroll has been down the last couple years, and for Beaver Creek to stomp Carroll on the road 44-14, to me, that's a surprising game there. So we know Beaver Creek's back at it, running that triple option as well, and that they're proving that they can be a real huge asset in that GWOC region.
AJ, in addition to what you said about Beaver Creek, I don't know if you knew it or not, Beaver Creek is coached by a Piqua alum, Nick Black. Nick Black was a football player here in Piqua, and he's moved down the road a little bit and has done a nice job with the Beaver Creek program.
Now let's get into this. The game last week, Trotwood 42, Piqua 35. Trotwood went to 2-0 on the season, while Piqua went to 1-1. Guys, it was a great game. You guys were back up in the booth calling things. Some notable stats, individual-wise, I would have to say. Stevens Peppers for Trotwood was 9 of 18 through the air and had 131 yards passing with 2 touchdowns. And he only rushed it twice for 17 yards, so that tells you that Piqua was really keyed on his running ability as a quarterback. But also they gave up 205 yards on the ground to Hargrove on 27 rushes and 4 touchdowns. So, you take away one of their threats, but you couldn't take away both of them.
Well, they had so many weapons. It's almost like you pick your poison. Who you're going to defend, who you're going to try to shut down. They had a good quarterback, they had a good running back, and they had 2 good receivers. And they just waited for you to commit, and they would try to go to the place that wasn't as well defensed as maybe it could have been. So, again, a good football team. It's certainly not a shame. It's a shameful situation to lose to Trotwood. They could be back. They could be back in Canton, I guess it is this year. I think that's where the state finals are going to be. They're good enough. It'll be a tough region, a tough district for Trotwood, but they got some people.
Well, Bob mentions a quarterback, a running back, and 2 receivers. I think maybe that's exactly what we got in store for us tonight against this Franklin bunch. I think we're going to hear the name Ryan Montgomery many, many times before this night is over. Our quarterback is 22 of 25. Holy Toledo.
Yeah, that's a very good passing percentage for him, and he probably has a really good quarterback rating. One thing I do want to point out, a couple things with the team stats. You know, Piqua was right neck and neck with Trotwood all game when it came to total yards and first downs. Piqua actually had more first downs than Trotwood did. Piqua had 20, Trotwood had 19. Trotwood had 368 total. Piqua 354. They were neck and neck. And guys, if a couple things go differently, Piqua is probably 2-0 right now.
Well, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, you know, very well could have been, AJ. The thing that hurt Piqua, I think, maybe one of the biggest things that hurt Piqua was the fumble. We had 1 turnover, and that was the fumble in Trotwood territory, and Trotwood converted and, you know, got a score out of it. So that was the difference in the ball game. Piqua played almost a mistake-free game. Did so many things well. Austin Davis really had a great night. You have to look at Hayden Shrub, Cale Mextroth, 2 of the Piqua receivers. Wow. Hayden just made some magnificent catches.
Yeah, he did.
Went up, fought for the football. In other words, they weren't just passes right in his hands. He turns around, runs a little look, and it's there. He had to go up in the air, take the ball away from an opponent. And Derek Height, our tight end, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns.
And you know, talking about Hayden too, Bob. You know, the week before against Meadowdale, he only has 2 catches for 2, and they both were touchdowns. This past week, he had 10 catches and 140 yards. You know, what a way to bounce back, I would have to say, from week 1.
And I think in the first game, they weren't really trying to look for Hayden all the time. You know, they just wanted to spread their offense around, and that's what they did. Here, I think Trotwood didn't know how to play him. Trotwood sometimes would play a real tight coverage. Then they felt, gee, he can beat us deep, so we're going to back off. And when they backed off, they were throwing the outside line pattern to Hayden, or just a short dig pattern, picking up 8, 9, 10 yards to throw. So Piqua took advantage of what they were given by the Trotwood defenders.
Well, again, I think we also have to remember that Austin threw the ball 31 times, and I think we have to give a little credit to the offensive line.
Yeah.
He was not running for his life all the time. They sacked him a couple times. That's normal, but he usually had enough time back there to spot his receivers. I don't know how many passes Hayden caught right along the sideline, but there must have been 3 or 4 of the 10, and that takes an awfully good pass. Austin Davis did a heck of a job. The offensive line deserves some kudos for giving him the time to do so.
Yeah.
And that's where games are usually won.
In the trenches.
On the line, yeah. Offensive line, defensive line. Always said, if my guys can block your guys, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's what it boils down to. You have to have good play from your people up front.
And you know, another good thing for Piqua was they had the 1 turnover, which obviously cost them a little bit there, but they only had 5 penalties. Trotwood had double the amount of penalties for double the amount of yards against Piqua last week. And Piqua, I'm telling you what, this team plays very good football for 4 quarters, and they make very little mistakes.
And that's what they have to continue.
Yeah.
They have to continue playing that way because, again, good football team in town tonight, and you can't afford to let down. You're going to have to play as well as you did against Trotwood, I think, to win the football game.
I would imagine if we look back at that Trotwood game, anybody would have said with those 2 teams, and as good as both those teams are, 1 turnover between the 2 of them, you're never going to see it. We saw it, and it was a tough turnover for Piqua, but that was the kind of game where not only does Piqua sometimes turn it over, but in the past, Trotwood's had a little trouble holding onto the football. They did not have that problem last week. That was a heck of a game if you're looking at it from that perspective.
Well, 2 teams that are well coached, well prepared, and you could just tell it by watching the football game. Lack of mistakes, and took care of the football. and Piqua very few penalties. So again, it was a tough game to lose, but I think that's something you can build on. It's not like Piqua was blown out after the game. You lost, you're disappointed, but you tell your team, hey, we stayed right with a very, very good football team, and you try to start building that confidence again, and that's what you have to do to prepare them for tonight.
Well, again, Bob, going back to Trotwood Madison, offensively and defensively, they're pretty strong. If, in fact, there's going to be something that's going to end up hurting them, it's going to be the kicking game. The kicking game was not real strong. They never tried an extra point other than the 2-point conversion. If you're going to get farther along in the playoffs, sooner or later you're going to have to kick the ball, maybe even a field goal and a PAT. I tend to think the kicking game is going to be an Achilles heel for the Rams somewhere along the line.
And that's what happens the further you move along in the playoffs. You run into teams that have awfully good kickers. We've seen kickers make 35, 38, 39, 40-yard field goals in high school, and that can be a game breaker right there.
And, guys, another thing I wanted to throw out there, Dwight mentioned 31 passes for Austin Davis. He did complete 20 of those 31 passes for 284 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. And somebody else I mentioned, Robbie Comstock. You guys were just talking about the kicking game. 5 for 5 on extra points last week. He gets the Golden Boot Award on the special teams.
I think I've got that underlined on my notes here. You're right. That might end up being a big part of this game tonight. Robbie Comstock, 5 for 5. Our kicking game was far, far superior to that of Trotwood Madison. I couldn't get a very good handle in reading the newspaper about the kicking game with Franklin, however.
So, you guys talk about that. We've talked about the penalties, third down efficiency, 3 for 8 for Trotwood, but, 7 for 12 for Piqua. That tells me Piqua was in a lot of third down situations, but they were in a lot of third and manageables, third and medium, instead of being in those dreadful third and long situations. What do you guys think about that, the ability for Piqua to get in those situations?
Well, I've always felt on first down, you have to gain at least 3, maybe 4 yards if you're going to be in a good position to run your offense. When you're in a lot of second and third and longs, boy, you put yourself in a very, very difficult position. So, yeah, picking up yardage on first and second is critical, and I think it allows you to expand your offense. It enables you to do more things because you're moving the ball down the field, and the further you get down the field, the more things you can do offensively.
And I think the fact that our passing arsenal is going to give us just a little bit of edge in picking up some of those long gainers in contrast to perhaps the running game, because if you remember correctly, Trotwood shut down Ben Smeezing the second half pretty well, so it might come down to some of those third and 8s and third and 9s coming down to Austin Davis.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, when a team does that, when they shut down part of your offense, typically they're giving up something else on another part of the field. So it's that's when good coaching comes into play. You have to be able to pick that up and take advantage of what they're giving you.
I agree with you guys 100%. I think, another thing to point out before we move on to our other segment here would be, the fact that on the first drive of the game, Trotwood gets the ball. Everyone's probably expecting Trotwood to, put a score up on the board, but Piqua's defense shuts them down, and Trotwood goes 3 and out on their first drive. Piqua's offense drives down the field. How much of a momentum booster was that? I think doing that for Piqua's defense on the first drive really helped propel them to where they were and how close they came to winning that game. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I think basically what it told me, and I think it probably told Coach Neese and the coaches, after seeing that first drive, we can play with these guys. We're as good as they are, and we just showed it by making them punt it away. I was surprised. I would never have bet a dime that they would punt on their first offensive drive.
Yeah, we overused the word, they're a good football team, but it's true, and I expected them to at least get a first down in that opening series, but that's a big boost for a defense. You come off the field, boy, and you feel good about, hey, what we just did. We accomplished a lot. We held an awfully good football team to 3 and out, and it's gonna hopefully be the kickstart to a real good performance on our part.
I hope so, too. Now we're going to go to our Coach's Show segment. This week, Coach was talking about depth and how healthy his players are.
We're totally healthy. We're clean. But we want to make sure that if that does happen, this gives us an opportunity, because you start to actually cut back on the reps that your number ones are getting. I mean, a guy like Derek Height does not need to be practicing for 2 hours a night. A guy like Hayden Shrub, those guys, we got to save the legs a little bit. Ben Smeezing, another example, and Dave Davis helps us out because he runs the scout team offense, and so he's kind of like having another coach on our defensive day. So he gets a little bit of a break. So that's the biggest thing we're trying to do, is we're trying to keep everybody. I don't want to say healthy, because you can't just walk around and do nothing, but I want to try to keep everybody fresh, is a better word for it, and keep everybody ready to go, and then the process develops more depth.
Talking about a little bit about that, and I think the evolution of how practice was. If you hear some of the old football players that played in high school years ago, they would practice 2.5 hours all the way up until middle of the season. But you're hearing now, or where week and two, we're trying to break those reps off. How has that evolved with football and keeping people healthy?
Well, I think it's a natural evolution that times have changed and everything moves on. Fortunately for us, we've never been a team that practices over an hour and 10 minutes ever. So, 20 years ago, we were practicing an hour and 10 minutes. Our Wednesday practices are done at 4:15, always have been done at 4:15. Thursday's a 45-minute, and then, we're coming with the idea that we want to be fresh not only week 1, we want to be fresh game 10 and hopefully game 11 through game 15 if you get an opportunity.
As we look and move forward to week 3, this will be the last week of our non-conference before we start.
And be good to go. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, back in the day, you guys practiced probably for a very long time, but this day and age, you don't need to.
Well, again, go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead.
Well, again, for those people who follow Piqua football, you can only be here for about an hour and see that this football staff is totally organized. You can go into the coach's office and there'll be a listing of everything those kids are going to do from start to finish. Totally organized. There's no standing around. There's no sitting around. It's a matter of organization, getting done what needs to be done. They don't invent things that will take time. I think the organization that Bill Neese and his staff do for practices is unbelievable. I don't know if I've seen it anyplace else, but you go to one of his practices, you can pick up the schedule, and you know when to come back and pick up your son to take him home for lunch.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Dwayne. I think also that as you get into the season, you're getting into week 3, week 4, you don't want to overwork your football team. They've been through a lot. They've been practicing since summer. And you like to think that we have everything down that we need to have down. Now, that being said, there are games maybe when one of your skills isn't what you want it to be, whether it's tackling, blocking, ball handling. Now, you may spend some time on a particular item in practice just to enhance that skill. But, yeah, you do. You send them out of here a little earlier unless you see that, hey, we need to work on a particular item.
I think it also goes to show to the fact that, these kids are still staying healthy. They come out here on Friday night. Last week, all the first stringers played all 4 quarters, and they almost dang near went to overtime. And, you think of that stuff, and these kids are still healthy. Piqua doesn't have any injuries, and if they do, they're probably minor ones. But just the fact that they're clanging and banging every single week, and these kids are staying healthy. It also goes to show you that these kids know what they're doing. Really, you get hurt playing football if somebody does something to you that doesn't know what they're doing, or you make a mistake, and that's what happens. And I just think
around the kids all year, in some cases 2 and 3 years, and that gets back to knowing your players.
And also, guys, I want to give another shout-out to our sponsors tonight, Unity National Bank here in Piqua, your hometown banking solution, and also Gonzo Radio. Gonzo Radio is commercial-free radio where the radio listens to you. Find them at gonzoradiopiqua.com. Gonzo Radio, bringing the true classic hits back to the Piqua, the upper Miami Valley, and to the world. Week 3, guys, rolling around here. You know, we've got 7 more weeks of football left to go. We've got an entire slate of GWalk games coming up. Let's go ahead and run down through these real quick. Sydney is 2-0. They're taking on Carroll, who is 1-1. Tip City 2-0 at home against a 1-1 Northmont team. Troy is taking on Bellefontaine. Both those teams are 1-1. Butler travels to Alumni Field to take on the Hurricane of Wilmington, who are also, both teams are 1-1. One of the only few GWalk teams without a win so far, Greenville 0-2, is traveling to Urbana to take on the Hill Climbers there. Urbana 1-1. Trotwood 2-0 is at Pinkerton Central, which is a really tough place to play, who's also 2-0. Fairborn travels to Beaver Creek to take on the Beavers. Fairborn 1-1, Beaver Creek 2-0. West Carrollton 1-1, taking on Preble Shawnee, who's 2-0 at home. Stebbins 0-2 at Kitten Ridge 1-1. Xenia 0-2 is at Alter, who is also 1-1. Centerville 2-0 is at home against another tough team in Pinkerton North, who is 2-0 as well. Fairmont 2-0 taking on Milford, who's 2-0. Springfield 2-0 at home against Lima Senior, who is 2-0. Wayne 1-1 taking on North Clarkston, Ontario, Canada. So they're playing a team from Canada, so maybe the Canadians can show us how they play football up there, I guess. I'm not quite sure. Miamisburg 2-0 against an 0-2 Loveland team. Lebanon 1-1 against Bishop Fenwick, who is 1-1. And Springfield takes on Winton Woods, who is 2-0, and Springboro, is 1-1. Guys, a Week 3 slate that's got a lot of good games on it. Tell me the games that you guys are looking out for this week.
Well, go ahead, Bob.
I'll say the first one that hit me was the Tip City and Northmont game. Tip's undefeated, 2-0. I think we're going to find out how good Tip is, because even the average Northmont teams are usually pretty good. I think we'll find out a lot about Tip City tonight, actually.
I think you're right, Bob. I'm looking at one that I'm looking at the Trotwood Pickerington Central game. We'll find out how good the Rams are, because we know all about the Pickering program. They are tough, and I think they have 2 or 3 high schools now. But you go down there, and if they would happen to run up a big score on Pickerington Central, I would say watch out playoffs, because they're going to meet they meet an awfully strong opponent. Again, I'm going to keep my eye on those senior guys. That guy that told me to keep your eye on them, we're going to find out whether they can be Alter and get in the victory column for the first time.
That could be a real good football game, because Alter, I think they're a good football team. Even though they lost the opener to Kettering, they have talent. Also, I want to look at the Troy and Bellefontaine game. Bellefontaine lost to Sydney by, I don't know, was it 10 points, 7 or 10 points?
It was like 9 points or something like that.
It wasn't a blowout by any means. So we're going to see how they match up against a Troy football team that's coming off a win over Xenia. And, of course, the fact that we play Troy in game number 10 gives us a lot of interest.
I think Springfield against Lima Senior. That's a big game that, they're going to have to look out for. We scrimmaged Lima Senior at the beginning of the year. We saw how good they were. Springfield, haven't seen a whole lot of Springfield yet, but I think that's another big game to look out for.
They usually have some powerful weapons since Maurice Douglas went over to Springfield, and they have some talent. Just a question of how they pull that talent together and focus them.
All right, guys, it's now time to talk about the game here tonight at Perk Field at Alexander Stadium. The Wildcats of Franklin invade Alexander Stadium to take on the Indians of Piqua in a Week 3 high school football matchup. It's going to be a titanic struggle between these two teams taking the field this evening. The Wildcats coming in looking to stay unbeaten after beating Carlisle 47-14 and Edgewood 49-21 in the first 2 weeks of the season. For the Indians, it's an opportunity to bounce back after the heartbreaking loss last week against Trotwood. In the matchup of these two teams last season, it was the Indians falling 30-6 against Franklin at Franklin. We know last year's scores can just be thrown out the window, because as we saw last week against Trotwood, last year's scores do not matter. Guys, tell me about what you're looking for in this game, and what Piqua is going to have to do to grab a victory tonight.
Well, I'll start because I've always said the team with the most turnovers is going to lose. There weren't many turnovers last week. That's the thing that the Indians have to avoid, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether or not the defense of Franklin can stop the offense of Piqua. I'd like to think they can, simply because Piqua's offense the other night showed us that they can go up and down the field. I think the defense of Franklin is the key, and again, can our defense stop Ryan Montgomery, Braden White, and Jared Kinzer?
I think it's going to be, I think there'll be some points on the board. And I think both teams are going to put maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns on the board. When you look at Franklin, a lot of weapons. Ryan Montgomery, he has scored 7 touchdowns, run for 306 yards. Braden White's a big quarterback, 6'3", 220. He's 22 out of 25 throwing the football. Again, capable of hitting the big play. And they have a receiver, number 7, Jared Kinzer. I think he's going to be the go-to guy throwing the football. He has 10 receptions for 119 yards. You know, this game could boil down to the fact what happens on the line. What happens from one offensive line versus a defensive line, and vice versa. And it depends how well Piqua is able to protect Austin Davis, and what kind of pressure they can put on this Franklin offense, because they run the spread offense, a lot of zone reads, and they can come at you pretty quickly.
All right, guys. One more thing before we sign off here tonight. Again, I want to thank you guys for coming back and being a part of the Piqua broadcast team. I love that you guys are both wearing matching polos tonight to commemorate the 2006 Piqua State Championship. Guys, let's do this. Monday night football game. The game's going to be played after our game goes off the air. We've got the New Orleans Saints taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Give me your guys' picks in that game.
Well, I've got most of my family members are Viking fans, so I'll take Minnesota.
Based on what I've read, I think Minnesota's a better football team, and I have to go with Minnesota also.
I'm going to go with New Orleans just because you both picked Minnesota, and I like Drew Brees. Drew Brees is another Big Ten guy who's done well for himself, but the Saints have had a couple down years. The second one, Los Angeles Chargers, not the San Diego Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers against the Denver Broncos. What do you guys got?
I like Denver. I think they're going to be a respectable football team.
And what about you, Dwayne?
Well, again, I'm looking at it a little bit differently. I've got a daughter that lives in San Diego. At one time when I was visiting, I had a chance to meet the previous coach, Norb Turner, for the Chargers, and my daughter happened to be at a social occasion, had a chance to meet Junior Seau before he passed away, so it's a very personal thing. I'm picking the Chargers only for those 2 reasons. They might not be enough.
And I'm going to go with the Broncos as well. I just love the Broncos defense and just the way that those guys take the field and play very well. Guys, any final thoughts here before we sign off and get you guys up to the booth?
I think it's all going to come down to whether our offense can put a lot of points on the board like they did. They can put as many points on the board as they did last Friday night. They've got a victory.
And I think Piqua has to force a turnover or 2 along the way to help ensure a win. That's, you can never get enough help.
I really don't think Piqua should lose another game all season long, guys. I think they're going to go 9-1 and have a really good seed coming into the playoffs, and we'll talk about that next week when we put together our studio show that we're going to do. Guys, I want to give a couple thanks again to Unity National Bank, our sponsors, Gonzo Radio, also Damian Skeens, the media teacher, and the students that are out here helping us put this broadcast together. We've been on YouTube Live. You're going to be able to see this again at 5 o'clock on Monday night before the game broadcast at 5:30 on the Indian Nation Station, Piqua Channel 5. You've been watching the Indian Nation Station pregame show here on the Indian Nation Station. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We have some cheerleaders back here cheering it all out. Going to throw some footballs later tonight. Again, we want to thank everybody for joining us here on YouTube Live. This, again, will be on the air on the Indian Nation Station, 5 p.m. Monday. The game to follow at 5:30. For Dwayne Bachman and Bob Luby, I'm A.J. Ganger saying good night, ladies and gentlemen, and go Indians.